All right, welcome back. You're watching Sokoni. We continue pace with the conversation, looking at the state of the economy here and a raft of issues that we should be putting on the table right now. But I wanted to show you just briefly also what we have as editorial cartoons, just briefly to just give an inkling of what our editorial cartoonists have drawn today, beginning with, of course, Gams and also Victor. And this is what you're waking up to. The climb down, that's the biggest story, of course, yesterday. Everyone was waiting for this. That is the climb down. Return to work formula. If we may, yes, we can see there the CS now climbing down. Everyone has been climbing down the ladder. And as we know it right now, the doctors are back to work. That is what we have in the Daily Nation. Also, the Standard today, we have Gams with Azimio, local politics. And how is he juggling now the two balls, local politics and AUC? He makes it look so easy. This is what the small puppy is saying there. Is it easy for him as well? Patrick Obath looking at the latest reports regarding also Fauzia from Somalia and also how some of African nations might not really be fronting for Raila Odinga.
I mean, once a politician, especially when you've been there for that long, always a politician. And the whole world of politics is about juggling options and seeing where things can work. And when you're at that kind of high level leadership of politics, you juggle, you are juggling very weighty balls, yeah, as opposed to very light ones. For us in our daily lives, it's much lighter. But here, you have to be a person of that stature to be able to juggle those kind of balls around. And if they're that heavy, and you miss the juggling act, and it falls, it will break harder than a smaller one, which might just survive the fall. So I think these are high-stake games. That's what I'm saying. It's very high-stake games. You go into it. You've got nations involved, not just a country, but nations are involved, and all those nations also have their aspirations and ambitions. And when you get involved in this, you've got to really work and really work your knowledge and your contacts and your networks. That is what is in place at the moment, and that is what obviously this particular job as the AU chairman will involve. And coming from Eastern Africa this time, all countries, that is why it was done that way. All countries will try and put their candidates. They'll go out and campaign like crazy and hope that you're the one that has the best message out there.
All right.
And it happened. I mean, look at the Secretary of the Commonwealth.
Right. If you may just have the cartoon back in full, please.
Yeah.
So,
sorry. Look at the Commonwealth.
Yes.
We had the Commonwealth Secretary. We put a candidate in there. What was the other one? Some in the UN. You also put another candidate in there. It's all around your ability to network and politic. But for success, you need to have started that much, much earlier before even the announcement is. So you need to have good relations earlier. You should always maintain good relations, cordial relations, talk to people, visit them, and have a good, be on very good talking terms all the time. So when you say we bring our candidates, it's not as though you're going to plead with them. They know you're ready and they're saying, so it's about time you guys did this, we'll give you somebody. But if you go to it at the last minute, then it's going to be a very, very strong fight.
Fantastic. Yeah. Now, talking about Azimio as well, the Azimio La Umoja One Kenya coalition has called on the government to declare the current flood situation in the country a national disaster to pave way for additional help and resourcing to assist victims of a crisis that has so far claimed near 300 lives and displaced more than 300,000 others. The opposition also castigated President William Ruto's donation of 10,000 shillings for flood victims as too little. Model 2 has more.
In a strongly worded statement titled KK is a disastrous regime, the Azimio coalition listed several areas it says President William Ruto's administration has failed Kenyans. The leaders, led by the Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka, terming the efforts being made by the Kenya Kwanza regime to handle the ongoing floods crisis as too little, too late.
Kenya Kwanza regime is reluctant to declare the floods a national disaster so that it can get the adequate response needed. We are aware that such a declaration will automatically call for the expenditure from the country's contingency fund. Could it be that there is no money in the contingency fund? If no money, who has expended the money and on what?
While criticizing the Kenya Kwanza administration for disregarding the El Nino warning from the weatherman late last year, the leaders also poked holes into the president's donation of 10,000 shillings each for the affected families.
Kila boma, serikali tutawapatia shilingi 10,000 ya kutafuta makao mahali mtakaa mkingojea mpango ya serikali.
For the families who have lost everything, such allocations are too little to start afresh. We demand that the government increase the financial support to at least 100,000 shillings per family.
The leaders also trained their guns at the embattled agriculture CS Mithika Linturi, who is currently facing an ouster motion, urging the 11-member committee to ensure he is kicked out of office.
We expect that 11 members of the select committee will honor the vote of the 149 members and confirm Linturi's impeachment from office. Linturi's reign as the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock Development has been nothing short of a disaster.
On the probe into the death of General Francis Ogola, who died in a chopper crash last month, Azimio wants independent and international investigators to swing into action and get to the bottom of his death.
Investigations by the Kenya Air Force is a limited internal affair that does not satisfy the requirement of an open, transparent, independent, and credible investigation.
The Azimio statement comes days after the Azimio leader Raila Odinga fired at President William Ruto for failing in his mandate. Emmanuel Talk, KTN News, Nairobi.
Kiamaiko area in Mathare, Nairobi County erupted into chaos as tensions flared between locals and police over the government's directive to demolish houses on riparian land within 30 meters of the Mathare River. Our reporter Vera Mora witnessed the tug of war while visiting a flood victim evacuation center in the vicinity, capturing the intensity of the situation.
In Kiamaiko, Mathare, there was a standoff between locals and police guarding National Youth Service bulldozers carrying out the demolitions. This as officers of rights activists in Mathare remain heavily guarded by the police following claims that they were the organizers of the anti-demolition protest in Mathare. Owners of buildings and shanties within 30 meters of the Mathare River bore the brunt of the loss following recent floods that claimed over 10 lives. This comes just a day after President William Ruto's recent visit in the area, where he promised new homes and financial aid to flood victims, now housed in 9 centers across Mathare and Huruma areas.
Kila boma, serikali tutawapatia shilingi 10,000 ya kutafuta makao mahali mtakaa mkingojea mpango ya serikali.
When KTN visited one of these centers, the young and old both queued here to at least get some food prepared by the Nairobi County government and well-wishers. This amidst increasing concern over worsening conditions at the centers.
Hata saa hii tunatamani tuoge lakini maji hakuna. Choo hakuna. Maji hakuna, choo hakuna. Wengine wanaara. Hata mimi mtoto wangu wanaara kwa saa hii.
It would be important you serve the food, eat the food while it is hot, and dispose any that may have remained to avoid contamination.
So far, the government has confirmed 34 cases of cholera in the country, which is worrying for those depending on these centers for shelter and support. Vera Mora, KTN News, Nairobi.
Interesting editorial cartoon that we have as well, just to capture what is ongoing right now regarding the riparian land. In Mathare, this is what is happening. But in Runda, you have boats. Yeah, in Mathare, you can move. The evacuation is there and you can see that altercation. But in Runda, you can stay. And of course, you'll be given boats as well to access... Patrick Obati.
Artists figure that out.
Yeah, so...
Those are friends of Patrick.
This cartoon is absolutely out of whatever. I mean, there are boats in Runda, yes, but those are not in the riparian area. These are in areas where they've people are built in depressions, and water has gathered in that place where the drainage is not sufficient.
But is it part of Karura Forest?
No. This is not part of Karura Forest. This is an old coffee farm, right? The riparian area, the UN Avenue, which has been flooding. That is the one that is in the riparian area. What has happened there? Some people have built walls. You extend your plot all the way down to whatever it is. So they live way above the riparian land, but they put these walls into that area. And what that does, it restricts the flow of water. So then you have water backing up and other people like that. Then the UN Avenue obviously gets flooded because downstream people have built walls into the riparian area. And that, I think, is something that needs to be looked at. I mean, what they're doing, if you're in the building in the riparian area, that's wrong. You need to allow the riparian area to do what it's supposed to do. And as I agree, some of the people have put walls down there, so the riparian area doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and it causes other people's homes to flood. So, but this, the boats that are being used in Runda are not in the riparian area at all. They're being used by people in homes that are in basins where the drainage, which was designed, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, is not sufficient given the current build-up that there is. So water is just backing up into homes, and people have to use boats to get access to their homes.
Bilo seems to not to agree.
No, I expected Patrick to say that because
No, I mean, that is my area, and I've been charged with the whole thing, and I can tell you, we have a disaster.
The government has always got two laws for the rich and the poor.
Yes.
This has always been the case.
Yeah.
And so it's not surprising that when the government says those who are living in dangerous areas, you must relocate, you must move out. That does not affect this
safer grounds.
It doesn't affect the Runda people.
This is riparian areas you're talking about, not.
No.
Even if it were riparian,
even if it's not riparian, but anywhere where there is a risk of floods and risk of mudslides, people have been told to move out. And so that applies to everyone. But of course,
those guys have moved out already. By the way, they did the minute their homes flooded.
No, but it's embarrassing.
The media has not done their story.
It's embarrassing that we have the United Nations headquarters there, particularly UNEP and Habitat and all those ones that are dealing with environment, and the flooding is happening on a stream. That's a river that passes just next to the United Nations, and whether people are building downstairs or upstream or downstream, it doesn't really. But the reality is that riparian area has been invaded, has been put up, and so the water is no longer flowing. And this is next to an international to UN. It's really a shame that this is happening, and I don't see the president and his team going there and saying, "Hey, what's going on here? Demolish this ones also." The bulldozers have not gone there to demolish those walls that Patrick has talked about.
No, they're actually coming.
Well, we have not seen them on TV.
Asked for it.
We have not.
No, actually, they've asked for it. The government has not been picked off the mark to actually demolish the walls. It has the residents association has to be called to.
We have to free.
Yeah, it's a law. There are two laws in this country anyway.
The bill, to be fair, and this is not just the current administration. Kuna wenye inchi, na wananchi. I mean that's for a fact. But even the economics of it, if government was to give 10,000 shillings to people in Runda, or even the 100,000 shillings that's being asked for by Azimio, the cost of relocating them will be much more. But I fully agree that when it comes to matters of important laws like the riparian lands, really the law needs to apply equally. But before we took a break, I was still on Botswana and pork, if you may allow. We talk a lot about.
I think we've moved. We're past that junction.
When we were going for the break, I donated in my chance. So when we went for the break, we never got back to it. But I wanted to say, that when we talk of Botswana, the interesting thing is that one of the leading farmers there is a Kenyan. I think it's Dr. Kathurima, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But so there are things that Kenyans are already doing out there, which we could do here. But also on pork, I wanted just to correct Senator Bilo a little bit, that I have friends who love pork chops. So apart from breakfast, they also take it for a main meal. But most importantly, and this is where I wanted to come to, there is a delicacy that a good friend of mine, Honorables Omolo Kero, former minister, cabinet minister, once took me to Mudaiga Club that we were offered a delicacy and it was heavily priced. I just forget the name, either close to Boland or Almond, but it was very pricey. So in terms even from pork, there is quite a bit that could be made. But the point I was coming to was Omolo Kero. This is probably the most unsung hero in this country. Many of my friends get surprised when I tell them Omolo Kero doesn't have any state award, honorary. Once in a while somebody says, Shem, how come you've never gotten any government or state award? I say, well, the premise is they say if you brought internet to not only this country, this continent, what more important contribution could one ever make to a country than that? But I say, no, even if I was to get one, I would decline. Thank God I haven't gotten any. I would say until Omolo Kero gets one. Omolo Kero was a multiple minister. Doesn't have HSC, doesn't have EBS, doesn't have EGH. He's, apart from being multiple cabinet minister, he was also chair. He did very well at Kenya Airways. I think as a country is an indictment on us and the government that Honorable Omolo Kero, living very peacefully where he is, has not been recognized for a state commendation. But he reminded me of this delicacy of pork that is served by one of our leading country clubs.
All right.
I see where you dined. Eh?
Well, I only went there once. Of course, I didn't eat it because I don't take pork. But the mere fact that it was so highly priced, that there could be a lot more we could be making in terms of even keeping pigs.
Back to that editorial cartoon. Could you comment on that, the divide that is there?
No. I want to comment on the AU one. You know, I didn't know whether the former Prime Minister was a good...
We're on the riparian land. We'll come to the AU one.
Okay. Now, on the riparian land, I think I already made my statement that there shouldn't be two laws in a country. There should be equity and equalness before the law, whether people live in Runda or they live in Madare.
Let me say something on that riparian land. I think it's okay if government doesn't show up in Runda at all. They are able, in fact, if need be, to hire a consultant to come and advise best how you fix it, and to lobby government to come and bring tractors and so on. Where government needs to be is where they are now, and even intensify. For one, and I have a family, being a politician, a direct family that lives in these areas that have called me up. The situation is quite dire. And the rest don't go there because they don't go there because they love the place, because it's cheap. And that's why the housing philosophy that we have must begin to be such that in the future it will it will make it unnecessary for people to have to seek such places, be able to get a place to sleep and bring up their children. Things are extremely difficult. The demolitions have occurred even in areas where the houses were still standing without them being given a chance to take out their belongings. It's extremely difficult. You go out there in the cold with the children, they're sleeping in some church, the church is in riparian land, and they weren't sure whether it will also go down. Perhaps the government will spare it while it's still being used as a shelter. So I think it's really important to concentrate thinking and so on. If we can bring slums under control, we will ease off pressure, but not remove it. We'll ease off pressure on riparian lands, and the impact on society will be much bigger. Now, the fact that, let's use Runda just as an example, it's not because anybody that we work with is lives in Runda, that Rundas exist all over the world. Every places that might be favored, the quality of roads in Runda, if you look at them, are good, they're high. I was a small house owner in Runda myself. Not anymore. I gave up my house, not because it was a riparian land. But even if you removed, even if you did nothing there, you see they will get boats for themselves. And if not, they can get choppers to fish them out of their rooftops. That's not going to be, beyond reach. Yeah. But where you need to be is Mukuru kwa Ruben, Mukuru kwa Njenga, and all these other places, and there are many unsung places also. And the difficulties are extreme. They are extreme. So beyond doing what we're going to do now during the crisis, we must be saying next season, next 2 years, right, what is it we'll do to ensure that we are not back where we are. Like in Budalangi, it's the same thing every year, and I must say that in Budalangi, even the local politicians have gone into the swing. They play along with it. Every year you bring along staff. I took staff one time as well when I was a candidate, and you donate. This is just a drop in the ocean. After we did donations one time, a young girl, 14 years maybe thereabout, she said, oh, we bring all these foods to give to the adults, what about with the children? She said, people of my age group can't get sanitary pads. She was very direct, we don't talk about that in our culture. And she put very vividly that they're not getting that, they're not being considered. We are sleeping next to people who do not know, because now the family is spread here in the classroom. And so, very serious social issues and so on. And the solutions are there. The billions we spend on water, if we did more water capture in the case of Budalangi, it won't happen, it won't help with the current floods. In the case of Budalangi, it would then mean that the upstream people have water and they can go, and they're very good farmers up there in the Trans Nzoia and other places. They can go into horticulture because water will be available all around the year. And the water going down to Budalangi will be about sufficient to what they need. They still need water. But what flows through the rivers will be, can be trained, and the channels will be able to carry the water. And engineers can calibrate this, except in exceptionally heavy rain. They can calibrate how much water is needed to flow down and to allow even some flow into the lake if need be. The science exists. Kenya has a lot of experts on this, but I don't know whether it's a sort of a framework or implementation or any other factors that one can only surmise.
I think I just want to come back on what this cartoon brings up, a bigger issue. Planning of urban areas, planning of in this country in general. When you see this kind of thing, it means that your planning controls are not in place at all. The slum areas, whilst they are slum areas, there should be no-go areas. So the riparian areas should not even have been built up in the first place, because the law of the land says exactly that. So the enforcement of the laws that we have, but also the planning of how we are going to put infrastructure in our urban areas is, I think that is lacking. What we're seeing here is the end of the pipe. We need to go back to the beginning of the pipe and put solutions at that end. So when you talk about planning permission and planning whatever, the planning that a city and a town does, the essence of that is to ensure that there is order such that these kind of things don't happen. You don't have people living in riparian areas and causing the water to flow, and then as it flows, it begins to erode things, and you are causing that restriction. If, for example, you had an area that is zoned for industry, you plan everything in a particular way. You look at the effluent, you look at the amount of rain it's going to take, you look at the drainage, you look at all that. And I think what we're seeing here is as a result of mistakes we have made in terms of the planning and the implementation of the planning or the planning laws within the urban areas. Mm-hmm. And I think let's just get back to basics. This is the issue of demolishing buildings and repairing it, and is sort of a knee-jerk reaction to a situation now. Yes, it's the right thing. Take everybody out of that place because the next rain is going to kill more people. So you're saving lives by doing that, right? Although they're going to be alive, but they're going to be living in slightly less palatable areas, and then deal with it. But don't allow people to go back, as Mashmeo says. Let's deal with it, and when we deal with it now, let us not wait 3 years later. You're going back to the same place to remove the same people from that place. So I think there is a whole policy and leadership issue that this thing has shown in the country.
Indeed.
Allow me to agree with the Patrick, I happen to live in the other part of what some call Leafy, Karengata. We are in an area where we're marooned by water because our neighbors just decided to block the pathway that was constructed for drainage. And the BAL, we've reported this to major government bodies. And we've tried to look at even the maps. It happens that for our estate, there was no wayleave provided to allow water to go out. So the neighbor says, having blocked the manholes, that you either pay for me or do A, B, C, D. And we are asking, how can this be? So if it had been properly planned, the BAL, my former senior, Paul Mwita, I remember for the time we're in Parliament, the 8th Parliament, one thing he would always talk about every month was drainage is everything, even for the quality of the roads. I don't know how much government is already thinking of post this rain period. The reconstruction work and the resources required is going to be massive. But I fully agree, planning needs to be done right, and we also need to plan for the post damage that's already caused. But the fact that it happens year in, year out is a major indictment on us as a people and government in particular.
Indeed. Just to remind Kenyans, of course, tomorrow is a public holiday where the government has gazetted Friday 10th of May 2024 as a national tree growing public holiday. The president on Wednesday announced that the holiday will be in honor of those affected by the floods. While addressing the members of the press at Meteorological Department's headquarters in Nairobi, Environment Cabinet Secretary Soipan Tuya also called out on the developed nations to stop the emission of harmful gases, as well as take responsibility for their actions by providing support to the affected countries.
I therefore wish to make a strong call to the rest of the world, and especially to the developed countries, to live to their commitments to urgently reduce emissions in this decade, and more importantly, to mobilize and provide timely, sufficient, adequate, and accessible climate financing, particularly for adaptation and loss and damage. We must act together to reduce the vulnerability of African countries, including Kenya, to the impacts of climate change. Lack of this concerted action now means that we will all pay the price later. Unfortunately, the cost of inaction will be much higher if we maintain the status quo, and may be too late for all of us.
Now, the Treasury is on the spot over the failure of ministries, departments and agencies, MDAs, to onboard their services on the electronic tax invoice management systems, ETIMS. The National Assembly's Finance and National Planning Committee said it will question Treasury Cabinet Secretary Njuguna Ndung'u on the reasons behind state entities not listing with the system. The government had set January the 1st, 2024 as the effective date for the implementation of electronic invoicing. The deadline was, however, extended to March 30th, when all entities, whether in the public or private sector, were to be onboarded on the ETIMS. This means that all businesses transacting with other businesses in the country were expected to invoice each other through the ETIMS effective April the 1st. With the Kenya Revenue Authority required to monitor transactions and have better visibility of claims of value-added tax refunds by companies. Well, it is surprising to learn from the Kenya Bankers Association that the ministries, department and parastatals have not been onboarded on the ETIM systems, Treasury shorts. Of course, this was some of the sentiments that were coming, some of the niggling worries that some of the state agencies were raising regarding this. So we want just to look at this in light also of what we have on the front page of the Business Daily as well, where KRA is pressurizing or putting pressure on landlords, signaling fresh rent increases, tax issues with rent stagnant for years, property owners required to pay 7.5% of gross rent. Let's just begin from there with the ETIMS, because it seems you're pushing the envelope to the informal sector as well to be on board, businesses, people, but the government who are supposed now to be a telling example or a sterling example in onboarding ITIMs are not doing so.
Yeah, I saw the research done by
Kenya Bankers Association.
Yes, that only about a half of the targeted companies and businesses have adopted ITIMs. And that's not surprising, because I think the whole essence of tax collection really is about simplicity and the ease of collection, the cost of collection. All those things are important. And even for the taxpayer, it must be easy to do some of these things. I think government asking a simple business, very small business, to have electronic invoice system means you have to get a lot of things to get, including you must have the knowledge in the first place. Get the hardware, get the software, and get all those things. And then at the end of the day, you know that the little money that you are going to make again is going to be taxed. So I know I was trying to get some doctor, get his this insurance, medical insurance with the doctors. They are not able to. Some of them are not doing now because they're avoiding this thing, because they're going to be taxed on the on the little consultancy fees that they're going to charge the patients. I think it's all about the pressure by the government to collect more taxes and trying to broaden and get everyone to pay. I think this, we have said many times, this attempt to try and tax everyone. It's not going to help, and a lot of people will go underground. People will simply avoid going on these systems because they know if they go on, you're going to pay tax, and things are tough. Businesses are not making profits, and the KRA does not listen. The moment you are on board, you get an arbitrary tax assessment. You will spend the rest of the year trying to convince them that that was not my figure and this is what I earned. So I am not surprised, really. So I think it's all about the way we are collecting. And what you haven't mentioned is that on how that money is going to be spent. That nearly 4 trillion will be the budget of this government next year, next financial year, and only less than 700 billion will be spent on development. I mean, so we're paying money. People are not, you've seen them demolishing, those structures from the poor people, but at the same time spending 1.7 billion to renovate an ambassador's house in London or in New York. I mean, or a billion for State House, just renovating it. When you cannot put up small mabatis for those people, you've seen them, they're intense, they can't get toilets. So I think they're misplaced priorities. And so why would I pay money? That's the issue for some of the small businesses. They struggle to make income. They struggle to make ends meet. You're supposed to pay tax on that, and you know where that tax is going to go. And those, I think, are the fundamental issues in my view. The tax, the whole thing about the tax really needs to be looked at. It's complicated, even for, by the way, even for big businesses. If you don't have a tax consultant, our tax regime is the most complicated. You try to go through the Income Tax Act, even as a top business, to try and address your issues of tax. It's complicated. Even consultants struggle. So I think that for me is a challenge, and I think government needs to ease the lives of Kenyans and let people have disposable income in their pockets to do to have a living.
We need also to address maybe the issue of, we're talking about ITIM still, and so many companies have been put on the special table if they've not complied with the ITIM system. And it's such a frustration for them even to get the tax compliance certificate at the end of the day. So you're caught in between, even with the amnesty. Sometimes if you don't really have the money that you're obligated by KRA to pay, maybe you're done with the waivers.
Let me tell you, the whole KRA law in the last few years has become punitive. If you are a business, let's say even this standard group is a business, you want to get tax clearance for something your company is bidding for, every director has to first get a tax clearance certificate. That's the first requirement they'll tell you. Yeah. Even when some of the directors have really nothing to do, they're not full-time, they're not technical directors, they're not involved in the daily operations of business. You have to get this. Wait, we try to import goods, our business. To get the import from KRA, because of excise duty, if there's some excise duty implication, you have to get an import license from KRA. Every one of the directors of the company has to provide their bank accounts I mean, it's so punitive. Everything about KRA, you get sick. And so it's like we're all thieves, and that they have to, that's the premise on which you start. And I think this is wrong. The KRA should know that you have to facilitate business. We should not focus only on regulatory aspects and saying, no, you are a criminal, bring the money. I think we should give opportunities for business to prosper, because there's more than just tax.
Indeed.
Because the more the business is prosper, the more employment opportunities, the more people have responsible. Government does not look at that aspect. It's about bring more money.
So if you deny the TCC, how are you able now to operate? You know, they demand tax from you, you can't do anything.
I think Bilo hit the nail on the head. Everybody will pay tax so long as they can see what that tax is doing. I think that for me is the fundamental bottom line. And I think I told this story before. I was in a taxi. We were in a minibus coming from Amsterdam airport to a hotel. And as we were going out, as we went out, I remember the hotel, I said, guys, something has changed on the roadworks here. This road is not the same as when we came here last year. And the taxi driver told us, oh yeah, no, we were involved in this, in the decision about this place. The government came and said they wanted to change this place because of accidents. And the local people made the decision about how that money should be spent, because that money was given to the local government. And they decided that that particular money should be used to do this one in priority over something else. They were involved in the decision about how their tax was being paid, was being spent. So here, how many people who pay tax are involved in how their tax is spent? Even when you come down to the CDF and whatever it is, which is more or less coming from our tax. How are the local people involved in the spending of that money? Do they actually work and prioritize for themselves? Or is it the person who's having the CDF going to build their office built by NGCDF? And it's this brand new office for the person who is, for the MP. Yeah? It is, that whole thing is what we need. The government needs to get credible in terms of using taxpayers' money. I will give you an example. I mean, this for me was a shocker. They're building this new dual carriageway from on Limuru Road, in Parklands area. When you go on that road now, rising towards Mudaig on the other side, there are potholes on the new road. As of the rain that just recently happened, there's 4 potholes that have appeared bang in the middle and they're yay deep. Is that the right way to spend my money? Because that is it's a very big sign there. They're spending, the road maintenance levy. Yeah, and you're seeing this right before your eyes, before it's even commissioned, that the thing has got potholes. That credibility about using the money correctly, I think, is the big thing that you're finding people not wanting to get involved in e-teams, not wanting to register, especially when they're trying to broaden the tax base. Because the people who suffer most are the people who they're trying to broaden to now. Yeah. And you put e-teams, you try to make it simple for guys to use it on the phone. Those guys don't want. They go and start paying somewhere else. Yeah. You try to get M-Pesa accounts and you begin to understand how much they're making, they go somewhere else. So the credibility of how taxpayers' money is being used is fundamental to getting the change in terms of people being willing to pay tax. If they don't see positive impact on their lives by the tax they pay, then they won't want to pay tax. And I think I just want to, before I finish, I'm just going to be a bit more skeptical on this issue of the MDAs not paying tax or not being on e-teams.
On e-teams, on boarding.
The e-teams traces every single transaction that you do. Do they want that? Do they want people to know the transactions that are being done in that place? No. So they don't want to get
officers don't want that.
Yeah. The amount of,
How will you make your money?
How will you make your money out of that place? I mean, when people are going to track where that money is going, they'll know, right? And if you're paying for fictitious, whatever it is, fictitious contracts or whatever it is that are being created there, those guys will have the record of you paying that money. Right? So, I mean, e-teams has got its issues. Some are real, some are imagined.
All right. I don't want to ask about Bunyasi Sakwa if they were on e-teams. So maybe it's a different kettle of fish for KDC because you are lenders.
Yes, but the nature of our business, there's not much room for play at the institutional level at that time. But we go back to the e-teams issue. there are, first of all, the critical thing about taxation is simplicity, and Bill Kerr talked about that. That you do not need tax regimes with mountains of paper to understand what's happening, and many countries have suffered that. In the US, it became almost an ideological issue. When Reagan came in, it was like, if I become president, I will simplify the tax code. And he did in a few cases, but the KRA materials still continue to grow. Simplification is very, very important. Two, there is always the option that if you don't want to itemize exactly what money you made, how you spent it, there is a certain blanket taxation that then you would face. And many people, smaller businesses feel the blanket one is unfair. And if they think it's really unfair to the core, they might opt to itemize what the earnings and outings of the business were, expecting that the tax assessment will be less. But I think the bottom line on that is that people who have been at a tax bracket will not go in laughing and singing a song. They will be dragged in. Their willingness to go and stay in there, they will go, but staying there is going to depend on what Patrick has just said, which is how is the money being used. Many people feel that, like for example, if you take the accident spot near Nakuru, Sachangwan, and for many years people have favored the fact that Nakuru Hospital should be upgraded to a major trauma center in the country, perhaps to be one of the most important trauma centers in the country, because of the kinds of accidents and the frequency that was happening. So indeed, it's true. Sometimes wananchi themselves can chime in on how the money should be used. And Nakuru itself was also gung-ho on it. It also is a source of income for the home county. There's no question about that. So those things can be done. There may be isolated efforts in the system. And we need, I think, to provide a bit more education on how to get a chance to voice in what needs to be done, and two, the government must have a predictable policy around chipping away on this progressively, so that finally we have a much broader tax bracket. Because if you remember in the late 70s and 80s, and Bill Kerr, you know this very well, there's a complaint about taxing the same narrow base, and the question was, why are you raising taxes on us? Expand a bit so that your targets can be met without undue pressure on us. It's a balancing act. You just need to be sensitive and listen to it.
I normally avoid generalization. I think, to be fair to some of the government workers, I don't think everybody working in government doesn't want to be transparent and all that. There has to be a few exceptions.
You talk about taxpayers, eh?
Yeah, in terms of even transparency of paying tax on e-teams. But the major problem I have with e-teams from a technical perspective and as a taxpayer, it's very painful. I wonder how KRA chooses its systems. One, apart from the tax regime changing all the times, sometimes I lose track. Have we moved from one platform to another? How frequently do we do that? What processes do they go through before they select systems? A tax registration and filing system needs to be simple. You shouldn't be sweating as a user just to pay government. It should be so painless. And technology is there to make it painless. Why e-teams and other previous predecessors in terms of tax payment for KRA, why it's complicated, defeats me as a person coming from that technical field. But in addition to it, in terms of public participation, and my colleagues have talked about this, to what extent does government involve the public, both at the county level as well as the national level? Even when they purport to have done some form of public participation, it's not something that's being seriously done, even though it's in our constitution. It's a requirement. But to what extent do we do it? But lastly, leadership and prudence starts from the top. Having worked for President Kagame, I remember there are times you meet him on the streets driving himself with just 2 bodyguards. I remember once my former boss, the minister who was in charge of transport and communications. We traveled to Sweden, Stockholm, and then the minister is called. He's told your car is being towed away. He said, no, just let the police take it, because we agreed in cabinet that the fuel guzzlers by government officers are going to be reclaimed so that people use simple vehicles. You know, there is prudence in the utilization of public resources.
And action, and they used to take action. When there's a pothole like the one he talks about, everyone
action.
there is in trouble.
I know, action is taken about it. In fact, and there is that one special day in Rwanda. Every other time, the people listen to politicians. But on that one day, politicians listen to the ordinary people, led by the president. They all sit down at the stadium, and people bring about their complaints and their suggestions, and they line the queue up to do that. I think in Kenya, we have not taken the ordinary, the
taxpayer seriously.
The wananchi. We have not taken them seriously. Lastly, Debal, it may not be true or possible or feasible that everybody pays tax. You know, those who don't even have anything to eat, obviously, there were Benzes, of course, need all to pay taxes. But how do we lift more of those wananchis to be the level where they can pay tax? I think even for those who are paying tax, let's simplify the process. I agree fully with the points that Bilo made on this regard.
Right, and Bilo has raised very pertinent issues, especially on the listing of the directors. Some of them, they're just poster faces, maybe when you're putting up the company and they're not directly involved, and you need all those tax compliance from them as well. But where does it put maybe an organization in a pickle, so to speak, or in a tight spot, where you cannot dissolve this company and you cannot open another company because you still have issues with maybe even the waivers? Thankfully, maybe for the amnesty, because it seems you can't operate completely. You don't have a TCC, you can't dissolve the company, and you can't open, because now that is connected also to the business registration center.
That is what Bilo said.
That's what I'm saying. Then how then do we expand that tax bracket if you're frustrating this particular individual? You have, and it's not an issue maybe that you don't want to pay taxes.
You see, legally, and I'm sure one of these gentlemen are lawyers. Legally, a company is a person, is an entity, is a legal person, quite distinct from the people who own it and the people who run it and so forth. And this is why it's registered as a taxpayer. And so the issue really is, this is a corporation, it is trading. You have got all its documents, it pays its taxes, it does all its whatever, but this company has to deal with another company, and that company wants, for example, a tax clearance certificate, as one of the requirements for them to give them some business or something. So the company is compliant in every aspect as a legal entity on its own, quite distinct from the people who own it.
Body corporate.
The body corporate. So then when you say no, before I give you a tax, so-and-so, Bilo has not filed we want to get his tax clearance certificate. Bilo is a different entity altogether. I may be a shareholder or a director in the company, but I may not have filed my tax return, or I may have my own other challenges with some other business or some other company, by the way. So how do you then make the work of this particular entity, which is compliant in every aspect, you frustrate it? And it's very common, by the way. It's very common. You cannot move. And it's unfortunate that in Kenya, because of the questions of integrity and corruption in this country, it has become standard that these documents are required. Tax clearance certificate, and even for small people looking for jobs, you have to come with your tax clearance certificate. You have to come with your police clearance certificate. You have to
certificate of good conduct.
Certificate of good conduct, and every little piece of paper. I mean, it's frustrating, but so these things, I think for business, it's really impacting on business. It's not really, you go through a lot. I mean, it took me 3 months to get an import license for products which we have imported, just because they want to see, they want to get my bank accounts of every director, get details of every director, just to give the company a right to import. And you can tax the company. The dividends or whatever that the director earns is a different matter. He's a taxpayer in his own capacity. You can deal with that person in whatever. So those are the challenges. Really,
I think KRA is just being lazy.
Being lazy.
Period.
Yeah, 8 o'clock. We'll pick up from the being lazy and also looking at the business daily. Is this also laziness? KRA pressure on landlords signal fresh rent increases. And it says here, just read for you an excerpt of what, before we take that the Kenya Revenue Authority is expressing discomfort, if my director may just pick it up, with landlords whose rental income has remained unchanged for years, signaling push for rental increases. In notice sent out to landlords last month, the taxman took issues with property owners declaring constant figures as rental income and asked them to ensure their rents are in line with the market changes. Should this be the business of KRA? It's upon me if I'm not making profit or not, all right? Yeah, let's take a short break and we'll circle back with this, because I think now this is giving leeway to the landlords now to think about raising the rents. And of course, that will affect you as a Kenyan. We take a short break.